Well, it's good to see each and every one of you. And if you are traveling from out of town on this holiday weekend, you're visiting our good city, we offer a very special welcome to you. We're glad that you've stopped in and worshiped with us while you're on a little holiday. So welcome to you. And if you come back to the area, we hope you'll join us again. I enlisted in the Army when I was 18, just almost 19, as a musician. My MOS, which is a military occupation specialty, was special bandsman. So I can tell people essentially I was in special forces. Not the kind that can protect you, by the way. You may be surprised and possibly dismayed to learn that Army musicians, just like everyone else, are required to go to basic training. So in September of 1981, the government sent me on a 6-week, all-inclusive, paid vacation to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and it was a unique all-inclusive. The entire time I was there, I asked myself, what in the world have I gotten myself into? I had to learn how to shoot a weapon. I'd never done that before. I actually had to throw a hand grenade, and I still have all fingers to prove it. And we even shot what I called a bazooka. I think it's called anti-tank weapon or something like that. And there were certain requirements that you had to pass. Like I had to learn, I still really never got how to say military time, right? But you had to learn a lot of military ways. You had to pass a physical fitness test. Back then it was 40 push-ups, 40 sit-ups, and run in a certain amount of time. We had to shoot and hit a certain amount of targets. 20 was the minimum. I'm not kidding you. I think I hit 17, but they let me go anyway. And there were a few other requirements. And you know, I did okay in most of them. However, there was this one requirement that absolutely locked me up, and it scared me to death. We were told by our host, also known as my drill sergeant, that we would have to, before we graduate, rappel from this tower at Fort Jackson called Victory Tower. Trust me, that's not me in that line up there. I was absolutely petrified. And every time we would march past this tower, which was often, we marched everywhere, I thought there's no way. There's absolutely no way that I can ever do that. And much less, I started asking, why do I have to do that? That has nothing to do with playing music in the Army. And I started thinking, every time I walk by, what will I do? What will I say? How can I get out of this? Because honestly, the options for me was fail basic training, tap out in some way, or die. In my mind, that's what I thought. Die, fail, tap out, figure out a way to tap out. Well, the day came to rappel off of Victory Tower. In the morning, we gathered around 5 o'clock to go to breakfast. Why at 5 o'clock? I have no idea, but we did. And before we left, the drill sergeant gathered us around and said, hey, I've got an announcement. I said, what? This is the day before graduation, by the way. He said, we are not going to rappel off Victory Tower. The wind is too high. We're not going to do it. You've all passed, or whatever. I later learned that it actually wasn't a requirement to pass basic training. They just did it to build confidence. But every single day, I prayed to God to make something happen. And God did. God heard my prayer, and I am so glad. To this day, I think God sent the wind to bail me out, and I'm just going to stick with that one right there. Well, today we're wrapping up part one of a series. We're going to do part two another time later in Judges. And Judges covers that span of history for Israel after Joshua had led the people into the promised land, but before they were led by kings. And so Israel during this time they were led by military and spiritual leaders called judges, not the legal kind, but military and spiritual leaders. And our focus has been on the spiritual journey of the Israelites. Bottom line up front, the Israelites struggled to be faithful as they had to do battle with the other nations around them. God didn't just lead them into the promised land and it was just an empty piece of real estate. No, there were other nations there. And so for Israel to take this land, they had to be faithful and they had to cling to God. But what Israel would do is they'd get in this terrible cycle of obedience and then disobedience. They would follow the other gods of the other nations. And then God would raise up a judge to lead them. They would come back to God. But as soon as that judge died, Israel would fall right back into the cycle. And this was a period of about 400 years. Today, we take a look at a very reluctant leader named Gideon, who had his own version of Victory Tower. His story is found in Judges chapter 6 through 8. And 2 years ago, we dedicated an entire series to Gideon. If you want to go back and take a deep dive, let me encourage you. There's a QR code on the back of your bulletin. You can scan that. It'll take you right to the YouTube channel with 3 or 4 sermons on Gideon. But there's one thing we didn't cover, and that's what I want to cover today. I want us to cover 3 barriers that Gideon raised up to obedience. 3 barriers to obedience. And I think by looking at Gideon's barriers that we can do battle with some of ours. So an executive summary on Gideon's leadership is simply this. He struggled to obey God's call to lead Israel to defeat the dreaded Midianites. God called Gideon to lead Israel out of this sort of diminished life, and he was incredibly reluctant to answer that call. More on that in just a moment. Gideon's own family was disobedient, and they were worshiping other gods. And Gideon, although reluctant, eventually obeyed God. And you guessed it, when he died, the people went right back into the cycle of disobedience. So let's take a look at Gideon's barriers to obedience. Judges 6, verses 11 through 18. I'll read it for us. The angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak in Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Abizrite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." "Pardon me, my Lord," Gideon replied, "but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about when they said, 'Did not the Lord bring us out of Egypt?' But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hands of Midian." The Lord turned to him and said, "Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you?" "Pardon me, Lord," Gideon replied, "but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family." The Lord answered, "I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites, leaving none alive." Gideon replied, "If now I have found favor in your eyes, give me a sign that it is really you talking to me. Please not go away until I come back and bring my offering and set it before you." And the Lord said, "I will wait until you return." This is God's word to you. 3 barriers to obedience. The first one I want us to see is sideways cynicism. When God approached Gideon, his first response was cynicism. Well, look again. It's worth reading again. He says, "But if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about when they said, 'Did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt?'" On the one hand, it is easy to see why Israel had been so overwhelmed. I mean, they were overwhelmed by the Midianites. They were living in caves and clefts. Crops were being destroyed. Livestock were being stolen or slaughtered. And Gideon is threshing wheat in a wine press that typically when you thresh wheat, you would be way out in the open. But he's in a wine press so that he couldn't be seen by the Midianites. The nation was collectively cowering. The text says the people cried out to God. But Gideon was cynical, questioning, and jaded. If you are with us, God, why has all of this happened? The challenge with Gideon here is that he didn't recognize Israel's disobedience contributed to the crisis they were facing. Cynicism is an attitude that runs almost from cover to cover in the Bible. You can trace it and see it. The people of Israel grumbled when they were liberated out of slavery from Egypt and said, let's go back. Take us back to Egypt. At least we had something to eat there. The writer of Ecclesiastes says, meaningless, meaningless. Everything is meaningless. The older brother in the story of the prodigal was very cynical of the power of God's grace. Thomas's grief over the death, the crucifixion and the death of Jesus is masked as doubt and cynicism. He won't believe the resurrection unless he can see and touch the wounds of Jesus. An attitude of cynicism should be taken seriously. It emerges when hopes are dashed, when fears run rampant, trust erodes, and our memories are distorted. This is why the Bible calls us to continually remain soft-hearted, to lean in and to trust God, to remember the goodness and the grace of God, and to stay open to God's wonderful inclination to surprise us with His awesome grace and power. It is human nature, when things don't go as we hoped they would, to turn in on ourselves. And in this turning in, it can become hardened into cynicism. I feel so sorry for Gideon here. This is no way for God's people, resurrection and renewal people, to live. Cynicism is what happens when disappointment becomes an identity instead of an experience. If we're not careful, we can turn to it to protect ourselves from disappointment by convincing us not to hope anymore. Think about that. Let me ask you a gentle question this morning. Does cynicism creep into your life at times? A loss of a dream can do this. An overexposure to negative media can do this. Broken trust and unjust behavior by those in authority can lead to this. I think you could make a case right now that our national conversation on both sides of the political aisle is laced with cynicism. If this is you, be encouraged. Gideon was cynical, and God kept moving toward him with grace and with hope. Be open to God moving toward you today. The second barrier that Gideon had to obedience was a very familiar foe, and it was fear. Verse 15 again, "Pardon me, my Lord," Gideon replied, "but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family." Bless his heart, Gideon is just so afraid here. The Midianites are giants in his eyes and in his heart, and he is the least in his family that he perceives to be the weakest. If you read chapter 6 and 7 in one sitting, you will be shocked by how many times that God keeps reminding Gideon that he will be with him, and yet how afraid Gideon is each and every time. Even when he obeyed God by tearing down the monuments to Baal and Asherah, he did so at night because he was afraid of the blowback from the townspeople. Can you relate to Gideon here? Fear lies to us and tells us that if we just play it safe and we just hold on tightly, that somehow we can eliminate all risk in life. Fear absolutely distorts reality. When I read Gideon's story this past week, honestly, I thought about Victory Tower for the first time in over 40 years. Once I got out of Fort Jackson, I left Victory Tower in my rearview mirror. I wasn't going to go back, or they made me jump off it or something. But when I started looking this week for pictures online so that I could show you Victory Tower, I was absolutely stunned by how small it seems now. I mean, in my mind, this thing rivaled a massive skyscraper. But you know what? Take a look. I mean, you're not going to break an ankle. Maybe you'll break an ankle. Maybe. Right? You got a helmet on. If you hit your head, it's going to bang around a little bit, but it's going to be fine. Why does it look so small now? Well, no one is making me climb it. That's why it looks small now. I'm arguably more adventurous at 63 than I was at 18, if that's possible. But I think the real reason is I've been through 40 plus years of life, and I've seen God come through over and over and over. He held us when both of our kids were born prematurely with problems. He walked with us after my mom suffered a life-threatening and life-altering stroke. He held us tight when we moved across the country to Minnesota and almost knew no one to start a new church. He covered us with grace in every ministry setting. We raised teenagers and lived to tell about it. I've seen God come through in fear, in spite of fear. In week 1, I encourage you to write down your story with God in your life. Keep a journal. We have one for you on the back table. And by the way, just take one. If you need one, take one. If you don't want to use it, don't take it. But we have a journal for you. I encourage you to write your story with God in this journal and keep it. Let me also encourage you to take a chapter, write one page, and just list down all the fears and struggles you've had in your life. And when God has come through for you. If you're battling fear right now, hear a word of encouragement from Gideon's story. Note that God met Gideon when he was in hiding. God will meet you in the cave of your fear. Note that God kept calling Gideon just to take the next step. Prepare the offering. Prepare the fleece. Cut down the army. Take the next step. God will take you step by step through your fear. Note that courage is not the absence of fear. Most courageous people move forward in spite of fear, not in the absence of it. Note that God called Gideon mighty warrior. Note that God saw what Gideon could be with God's power and not just who Gideon was. And the same way is true for you. Gentle question this morning. What would you do in your life if you took fear off the table? What would you do? Let's look at the third barrier to obedience. I've simply labeled it for us, signs before surrender. God assured Gideon a second time that he would be with him and prevail. But look at Gideon's response. He says, "If now I have found favor in your eyes, give me a sign that it is really you talking to me. Please do not go away until I come back and bring my offering and set it before you." Gideon prepared an offering, and God confirmed his presence, and yet Gideon still struggled to trust. Gideon was the first person in the Old Testament to ever say, "God, give me a sign." Usually God initiated the giving of a sign by his grace. Now, to be certain, there are times when God gives evidence of his presence and work. You know, one of the thoughts that I continually have in my mind about God is that God reveals enough for us to have faith, and God leaves enough mystery for us to worship God. Right? If we figured everything out about God, then we wouldn't worship God, we'd worship our ability to figure God out. Right? But God reveals enough for us to have faith. God continually gave Gideon presence, evidence of his presence, through consuming the offering and later the fleece. But Gideon's insistence of a sign revealed a lack of trust and an unwillingness to take God at God's word. And when this happens, it is a spiritual problem. It is a serious barrier to obedience. I mean, what if God had given me a sign in week 1 that I didn't have to rappel off Victory Tower? I wouldn't have talked to God constantly for 6 weeks. There's another angle to Gideon's preoccupation with signs from God, though. One scholar wrote, Gideon was willing to believe. His problem was he was demanding assurances of success before acting on what God had revealed to him as his will. This hits a little bit closer to home, doesn't it? We are a planning people. We like metrics and data. We like to calculate odds and possibilities of success, probabilities of success before we act. If we're not careful, we can adopt a ready, aim, adjust, aim, go back and study, kill it in committee, and never fire. What we're looking for is a sign of success, but for surrendering to the call of God in obedience. And God never promised us that. Let me say it again. If we're not careful, we look for signs of success before we surrender to the call of God. I don't believe God intends us to be reckless, but God does expect us to obey and trust without a sign or assurance of a vision of success, or at least our vision of success, because God's vision of success and our vision are not always in alignment. Next week, we'll have our second community conversation in our What's Next journey. Yes, we are planning. Yes, we will have metrics and data. But more important than all of that is we are seeking the will and the mind and the heart of God. And trust me, God will call us to a future that we cannot yet see. He will call us to a future that requires more faith and more trust than we have now. We may not always be given certainty, but God will give us enough grace to take the next faithful step. And that, my friends, that is where the blessing is. Gideon is not a picture of first-time obedience or blind faith. And still, God poured his grace out on him anyway. When I read the story of Gideon and God, I can't help but think of Jesus. In our struggles, in our doubts, in our fear, and in our cynicism, Jesus moved toward us and died for us. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Our big idea this morning that you can write in your book when you pick it up on the way out. God's grace through yielded faith will overwhelm our cynicism and fears. Have you become strangled by cynicism? Receive the hope of Christ today and trust that he can breathe new life and hope into your spirit. Are you paralyzed by fear? Receive the peace of Christ today deeply into your soul and allow the resurrection power of Jesus to reign in your life. Do you want to deepen and strengthen your faith today? Trust God, sight unseen. Watch him make, in his time, the invisible visible in your life as you trust him. I want to close today in a little bit differently. I want us to end by giving you a time to reflect on your spiritual journey. Maybe you want to bring a fear or a struggle that you're wrestling with right now and bring it to heart and bring it to mind. Maybe it's been weighing on you. And as you reflect, I just want you to ask you, just allow God to saturate your heart and your mind with his presence and with his grace. This song is a great hymn that declares that no matter what may come our way, we can rest in the goodness and the grace of God. And we can have hope because of the new life and the resurrection of Jesus. Listen and allow God to draw you near this morning.
When peace like a sorrows like sea billows roll. Whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. My sin, oh, the bliss of this glorious start. My sin not in part, but the whole. He's nailed to the cross, and I bear it no more. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, oh my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. Oh Lord, haste the day when my face shall be sight. The clouds be rolled back as a scroll. The trumps shall resound, and the
Let me invite you to stand for our benediction. And as you do, let me encourage you to take the message of those two great hymns with you as you go from this place. That remember that because of the resurrection of Jesus, we have hope. We have hope for our fears. We have hope for our struggles and cynical thoughts sometimes. We have hope in the midst of life's disappointments because He lives. Amen and amen. Go in peace.